Right now, most leaders in higher education aren't struggling with ideas. They're dealing with everything hitting all at once: budget pressure, AI, way too many initiatives, with no clear way to move forward at today's speed of change. So the real question is, how do you actually execute without breaking the institution? I'm Wayne Bovier, and this is Transformed. If you're a president, provost, vice chancellor, CIO, or VP leading change under pressure, you're in the right place. No theory, no fluff, no vendors. Just real conversation about what's working, what's not, and how to move faster, prioritize better, and actually get things done. Welcome. Let's dive in. Welcome to Transformed. I'm Wayne. Right now, most leaders in higher education aren't struggling with ideas. They're struggling with everything hitting all at once: AI, budget pressure, enrollment shifts, new expectations from students, and no clear way to move forward. And that's what this show is about: how leaders navigate that pressure and actually move their institutions forward anyway. Today, I'm joined by somebody special, somebody who's been thinking about this way longer and more deeply than almost anyone else in higher education. It's President Steve Spinelli of Babson College. But what makes Steve different? He didn't just come through higher education. He's a multi-time entrepreneur, built and scaled businesses, founded and has worked inside high-growth retail companies like Jiffy Lube and Planet Fitness. And now he's leading one of the top institutions in the world focused on entrepreneurship. And what Babson is doing isn't just about teaching entrepreneurship. It's about embedding it into how students think, act, and create from day one, which raises a bigger question for us all. What happens when higher education stops just teaching entrepreneurship and starts operating that way? Steve, welcome to Transform.
Could not be happier to be here, my friend. What do you want to talk about?
Well, let's just dive in. Both of us are entrepreneurs, and this is and in higher education. So this is going to be a fun segment, and I'm really looking forward to this. So, entrepreneur requires kind of a mindset, right? And one of the things that stood out to me when we first talked is that you're not just teaching students about business first. You're actually asking them to create something immediately. Why start there? Why make creation, right? Starting a business really as part of a freshman course, the entry point instead of theory?
Yeah, it's a great question, but I think it's a fundamental difference of how Babson approaches education in general. I'm fond of saying, when I was teaching, I used to say this all the time: thought without action is frivolous. Action without thought is dangerous. So if you really want to optimize your opportunity for success, combine thought and action. Now that becomes really important, we think, for students who are young and assertive and looking at what they want to do in their life, to see the picture in a holistic way. It's not, you don't do finance because you're just good at numbers. You don't do marketing because you have you're keenly aware of people's empathetic feelings. You have sympathy and empathy. You do all of that to create some kind of solution to a problem, and you'll make a margin doing that. If you put it together, you see how the pieces fit. You think deeply, you act decisively, you continuously learn, and you build businesses. So when you go back, we do this as a freshman, the foundations of management and entrepreneurship. You get put on a team your first week in college. We give you a budget. We fund it for you. You create a business. You go start selling things. It gives you a holistic view. When you start to take pieces of it, you see where they fit. And when you see where they fit, you know that it pushes against something else. And how do I grow that? And that integrated thought and action becomes very vibrant. It is a dynamic process. And let me tell you, you take an 18-year-old and you get them fired up, they can do anything. Why repress that feeling? Give them the big ideas. Have them go out and start thinking, I can create holistically.
I love it. As a quick follow up to that, what have you noticed, right, from how students react to this? I'm sure that you've had a couple of years under your belt when doing this, and so how are students, like, when they look back, when the other academics are telling you, like, wow, this is really different, starting them out this way? Have you noticed kind of a shift in that freshman mentality?
First of all, I see a shit. We've been doing it for 20 years. Babson was so far ahead of everyone. Everybody thought it was either crazy or mind blowing or too hard to do or so out of the norm. A lot of people didn't follow us. It has become a core part of our curriculum, and it is taught across the disciplines. So this is a multidisciplinary approach, which, by the way, when you're solving most problems, you're thinking in a multidisciplinary way. So we create three-dimensional minds. I think that is a super important part of the role of higher education. So what this does is it gives students who are assertive the kinds of tools to think like this early on. They embed these ideas as a part of their learning process. So they see aspiration in more holistic ways. And you go into a class and you're going to do something capital allocation, which can be really heavy and quantitative and all that. And they think, what value is being created from this? How is this going to motivate shareholders in the long run? What is going to happen with senior management? How are the banks or the capital marketplace going to look at this? They start to expand their horizon to see who the players are. That gives them a much different view of the world. Now, I'll tell you, we've always thought that was a real competitive. It's hard to do. And it's taken us, we're into it 20 years and we're still getting better. And I hope in another 20 years, we're still getting better. So it's a very dynamic process. You have to invest pretty heavily to get this down right. But we did, and it's working beautifully. And you can't have any conversation without talking about AI, but with AI emerging so powerfully, what we're seeing it's doing is that we're creating an experience in college that mimics what an intern or what a new hire might go through. So when our students enter the workforce, they're thinking, I have to create value now. I understand all of the holistic approach. I'm ready to go to work. I want to be judged on what I create for this organization. That's a huge competitive advantage. Well, you get hired and you got to be invested in. Our student gets hired and they get a return.
I mean, it's truly amazing. I mean, I'm blown away. Like you are really, from day one, you're creating, you're having your students create value. And that's fundamentally a different starting point than most institutions. It's just diving into the practicality of that. So let's move forward on this and let's talk about what this means operationally. You mentioned that this has been about 20 years, going through this. So from curriculum to operating model, so let's go a little bit deeper on this. And so you're not just teaching the entrepreneurship as a subject, you've structured the experience around it. Teams,
That's right.
you already mentioned almost all of these teams, capital, real businesses, real outcomes. What had to change institutionally? There's two parts to this because I'm going to tag on to something you just said. What had to change? Again, doing this for 20 years, what had to change institutionally to make this real? And then when you look to AI and ongoing, you alluded to, we constantly have to kind of reinvent what entrepreneurship is in the AI world, right? I think some of the headlines that I've seen is that I had to validate whether or not that's true, is like a one-person billion-dollar company, right?
Yeah.
And mainly because of AI and AI tools. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a super interesting and good question. One of the ways I answered, one of the learnings that we had is academia oftentimes talks about a discipline. And so your finance or your marketing, and that's a discipline. And then they talk about interdisciplinary, and that's a lot of disciplines coming together. What we do in entrepreneurship and what we teach in entrepreneurship, in some ways, learned in our foundations of management and entrepreneurship and the build out of our curriculum, was that you can have a transdisciplinary approach. So when you have one or many or all together, it teaches you how to work across all of your thought patterns. How do I integrate a marketing plan with a finance plan, with an accounting system? That gives you a holistic view. And when you start with a student who says, I understand there's a whole, now give me more and more substance. When I teach how that bolts in and how that intersects. You have this much more powerful fist of an organization that you are building and changing and understanding where the changes will affect other parts of the organization. That leads to a couple of things. One, it leads to a lot of teamwork. These fresh, the FME, we call it, the Foundations of Management Entrepreneurship, are taught in teams. They learn as much about social behavior as they learn about entrepreneurship in that first year doing that. There's a ton of stuff that goes on: who's good, who's bad, who works hard, who isn't, who's for real, who isn't for real, how do I push. That interdisciplinary relationship, that relationship building, it's a huge competitive advantage going out. They look into organizations, but we see scale coming out of that. I think the other thing, we're studying this like crazy, and frankly, we're investing very heavily in AI. It generates better questions. It generates better understandings of data sets. It understands how data sets can come together and must come together. So if you have better data sets with better questions, the queries produce better outcomes, you should get a competitive advantage. And we're working very hard at trying to understand that at a very acute level.
This is, again, great. So think about who's listening and watching us and have this conversation, right? I strongly believe in, I advocate quite often that, institutions, higher ed institutions have to be more entrepreneurial, right?
Yeah,
And there's probably no doubt that you've had a lot of conversations with other presidents and provosts at other institutions.
sure
And
has.
so if you have a president and provost listening in, what's some advice about how do they actually get started, both with the idea, right, of teaching entrepreneurship, but also embedding it internally and then executing on that? What's kind of your advice on how do you get going and how do you start to move forward?
My first recommendation will not surprise you. Come to Babson and come see what we're doing. But I mean that very seriously. We welcome discussion, because I got to tell you, every time someone comes and says, "What are you doing?" we learn something too, and we just get better, and they get better, and we share. That's number one. Number two is we formalize that interaction in a thing we call Babson Academy, and a consortia that we have formed now, about 50 colleges, and we share stuff. So you get this vibrant set of entrepreneurially minded schools doing a whole bunch of stuff, and it's just growing and growing. So, come visit us. If the consortia looks good to you, join it. If not, let's just keep exchanging ideas and go forward. The other thing I would do is, similar to the entrepreneurial process, start investing in startups. Startups, within your own organization. How about a new freshman course on business modeling, or a senior course on experiential learning that forces an English major and a religion major to work with a finance major and a history major? I don't know. Figure out and go to your alums and say, can you be pioneers in new learning? And be very serious about that. We have found when we put liberal arts and business faculty together, they'll blow your mind in the great stuff they'll do. You think that it might cause an explosion, but a sort of a disciplined explosion is power, and it creates these amazing insights into the curriculum and experiences you can do. So bring them together, formalize that bringing together, and fund some of it in an experiment that is rigorously monitored and the outcomes judged. And sometimes it'll completely fail and you'll still learn so much. It'll help change your institution.
It's so funny. I was an English major and I got my MBA, so I'm an embodiment of the thing you just
I love
everything
you,
you
man.
just said. That's great. So I want to dig in even a little bit more on this. Like when you think about other institutions, right? And it was a great answer, but when you turn it around, what's holding them back? Right? Is it governance? Is it culture, risk tolerance, incentives? Like I think your ideas are great. I just think a lot of institutions get bogged down. But what do you think is the kind of the real friction point that is stopping institutions from doing more around this?
We probably could spend the next 2 weeks having a discussion about, or 2 years. And, presidents get together all the time and talk about this. And it's really very different, I think, at different institutions. I think historical hierarchy and processes are hard to change. And when you look at the road an academic has to travel, it's hard you get an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, a PhD, you write a dissertation, you get postdoc position, then you get pre-tenure, then you get tenure, then you get promotion, and okay, you've spent 25 or 30 years. Now I'm telling you to change. You know, there is some unreasonableness to the value proposition we've presented folks with. So we've got to find routes to career development that incentivize the kind of behavior that experimentation that will create experimentation. We've got to protect some of them. We have a contract with tenured professors. Can we reward them for making mistakes? You know, they're typically super bright people that are used to getting A's. You know, and in higher education,
like to fail. Yeah, right.
yeah, they don't like to. They don't like to. You know, you think about it. You get the term marked down. I marked you down for this. What if I marked you up for this mistake because we all learned so much? Could we start to change the language in the relationship with some of the faculty? And they're so smart that if we can motivate. I look back at how FME was faculty driven, and our entrepreneurial leadership village that we're creating was faculty driven, and some of our AI generator was driven by faculty. You give them the space to do that and a little bit of seed capital, man, you can do a lot. You almost have to think of yourself as an entrepreneurial organization that has to reinvent itself after 100 years. And maybe now the reinvention is a part of the mechanism. And if you like process, okay, reinvention. What is the reinvention at ABC School? The reinvention roadmap that we do, and you get credit for being a part of that reinvention, success or not success. If we could do that, we would really motivate. Listen, most startups fail, but we learn a lot. We haven't stopped starting businesses because a couple failed. We think bigger, we think more acutely, we teach better, we keep going. I know 100 entrepreneurs that failed on their first attempt, and on their second, third, or fourth did incredible things. Let's keep it. We've got to figure out that relationship with the faculty. I think that's a real starting point. The other thing, though, Wayne, I tell you, is we've got to reestablish our relationship with industry and with commerce. We have to say, we want to partner with you so that when this kid hits your door, you're getting a return on investment. If you're going to make some investment, you can make it in helping us teach and bringing us new problems and funding research. There's a lot of ways, but we've got to make a deal with you. You got to get a return on investment. And there's these young minds that are going to go blow your mind. And I think if we can combine all of that, listen, I believe, when I was teaching entrepreneurship, I used to say, the only thing absolutely required of entrepreneurship is market demand. Somebody's got to want what you do. You can be the best thing in the world, but if nobody wants it, I'm sorry. I paint what I think is better than Picasso. I haven't sold a painting ever, and I never will. It's awful, but I think it's great. So what? There's no margin in it. I got to find market demand. I say that the demand for units of knowledge to live a life is increasing. Do I have to know more tomorrow than I did today? Will people have to really grow? I think they will. And I think if that's true, then we have a great future. Higher ed.
Yeah. You talk about failure, right? A core principle, being an English major, spending most of my career, entrepreneur, but in the software industry, right? Agile, one of the core principles of Agile is fail fast, right? And learn. Yeah. Right. And so I think a core tenet of entrepreneurship is, no one likes to fail, but if you fail, at least walk away learning the right lessons to make you stronger, to make you better for whatever comes at you in the future. So I think that's a great insight about, better supporting the provosts and the academics. And I think you highlight why, I wrote a paper a long time ago, really taken to heart kind of the challenge with academics, right? The onslaught of technology that has inundated them since the late 90s. I really understand there's been a lot of empty promises. Oh, this like an LMS, like a Blackboard of the world. When I worked for Blackboard, it's like, this is going to make your job easier. Like that was the sales pitch. right?
Sure.
And so I totally understand that. So I want to move to, we already touched on this briefly, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into this concept of AI and the future of value creation as it anchors around this entrepreneurship, right? So when we layer in AI, right, we already talked about students can build faster, they can learn faster, they can launch faster. When you think about AI, how does the model in terms of higher education and entrepreneurship make this more or less urgent?
I think the higher education business model writ large is a perfect vessel for AI. If depends on how you look at that vessel. I think of it in terms of teaching, research, and market-facing behaviors. So in teaching, I think that we can create assistants. We are creating assistants now that if you take a course in franchising from Steve Spinelli, which is the only course you ever should take if I teach. If I teach anything else, you probably should skip it. But if I teach franchising, you might want to take that course. You should be able to ask Steve Spinelli or Steve Spinelli's bot any question you want about franchising 24/7, 365. And you'll get a pretty good answer. I got to tell you, I dumped everything I've ever done on franchising into this database. And over a I'm old. There's a lot of stuff there, including a dissertation, every case I wrote, financial statements, 1,500 disclosure statements from franchise companies. I ask it a question and it's using my information. It reminds me who I am. It reminds me what I used to know. I mean, it is a brilliant assistant. I feel like the assistant in that. We can teach at such a deeper level. So we can teach deeper and at scale. That's we would, a lot of people think that depth uh, uh, um, eliminates scale. Now we have depth and scale. I could teach 1,000 students, I think. If you want to quest 24/7, 365, you sign up for my course, you are endlessly educated. That's just an amazing phenomenon. So I think we can really start to leverage our great skills in this. Number two is, it's really interesting. People say to me all the time, AI is going to take jobs. It's going to get in the way of entrepreneurship. We're not going to have opportunities for entrepreneurs. And I say, okay, tell me this. Are there more problems or less problems in the world today than there were 10 years ago? And they all say, everyone, 100% says there's more problems. I said, well, we're not doing a very good job as entrepreneurs. My understanding is that entrepreneurs are supposed to solve problems. So why aren't we're not solving problems fast enough or big enough? Okay, now we have a tool that helps us solve them more often, bigger, faster, better. Let me tell you, there's 100 years of work left. I'll let somebody else 100 years from now worry about it after that. But I think we've got 100 years of problems that we could solve, and AI can get there faster and better. And we're looking at this very deeply. Opportunity recognition, resource gathering, business plan analysis, industry analysis, margin analysis of a new concept versus an old and why. We're road mapping the entrepreneurial process against AI tools at Babson and coming up with a massive architecture for how to improve the teaching of entrepreneurship. I was going through it just a couple of days ago. I was so excited. I thought, I got to get another degree somehow. I think I got every degree you can get. I want more, which is another thing, by the way. That's that whole units of learning. And then I say to myself, well, I can take the course. I don't need a degree. I'm going to take the course. Why not? And you think about it that way, and you deconstrain yourself from the credentialing, and you say, I want to go educate the world is about the potential of entrepreneurship. Wow. I think it's incredibly fraught and incredibly valuable. This is the time for higher education to step up.
And I couldn't agree more with you. Part of the reason I started Higher Digital is, and this is obviously before COVID and AI, it's like I believe that we need more teaching, more learning than we ever have, right? And now we're in the AI era, and I feel that way even more strongly. And so, kind of what you alluded to really gets to that. It's like, instant, like the demand is out there, right? Like if you only view it through the lens of 18 to 22-year-olds
That's right.
versus like an ongoing, constant, like we all are going to have to reinvent ourselves, right? Way faster and more than we have ever had, and so institutions are going to need to be still the center of the teaching and learning world, but how you teach, who you teach to, we would really have an opportunity. And I think you touched on it with the AI component. And I don't know if you're comfortable. I know you and I talked about this. This is kind of an ad hoc question, but can you say a couple words about how you're challenging the growth of Babson, just based upon the AI, right? You talked about, hey, we're a certain size institution, but let's make that significantly bigger. I'd love for you to kind of
Yeah.
share some of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable because I think it's required. Our sort of strategic vision is entrepreneurial leaders impacting communities everywhere. 5 words. People believe in entrepreneurship. Leadership is an important aspect of getting out front to solve the problems. Impact means there's got to be some value created. Communities mean not just in startups, not just in businesses, but across everything you're doing, from government to churches to not-for-profits to for-profits to startups and to old businesses, across every industry. Everywhere means is really, it's the hardest part of the 5 words is everywhere. That means I've got to have technology and I have to have partners. And we've got to think about scale across the entire globe. Everywhere is everywhere. We may have to go to the moon in 10 years and teach the new colony on the moon. That's okay. That's
Yeah,
good. But for the first time in the history of the world, we can teach anyone, anything, anywhere about at any time. That's an amazing phenomenon. So we're building digital education, universal learning modules. We built that are 3-hour segments that you can build into different kinds of curriculum. It's sort of the modern version of a textbook, except it's super dynamic and digitally. It can be synchronous or asynchronous. We're going to build that out. We're going to use the collaborative, our consortia of colleges, to help distribute that. We're going to learn from them. They're going to learn from us, and we're going to keep growing. There's billions of people that need education. That's a big market. Let's go get them.
that's right. That's right. That's especially in today's world. So one we kind of touched on this next segment, which is like your advice, but I'm going to turn it around a little bit. You gave some good advice on how where to start, other institutions, other leaders. Let me turn it around and say, what's one mistake that you would advise them not to make? Like, what is something that they should a mistake they should look to avoid?
Yeah, uh, one-off deals, a series of one-off deals that don't fit a strategic intent. I do believe that there are classically designed vision, mission, strategy that schools ought to be doing the hard work around. What are we really great at? What can we serve the world with? With Babson, we have a competitive advantage. We're a business specialty school that created a discipline called entrepreneurship. We said we're going to double down on that entrepreneurial leadership. Listen, I think we're the best in the world at a discipline we created, and we said, let's start changing it. That takes a little stomach lining away when you go through that process. But what I would ask people to say is, what am I really great at? Where do I see the real need? Can we do something to really concentrate that power? That's number one. And number two is to collaborate. We spent a lot of time before we got to that, spending a lot of money, a lot of effort, and then finally we said we've got to get it together and get focused on this. If we do that, we'll be better off. And there's just so many important things to do. You can get so distracted, and I did, and I'm probably ADD anyway. So I get very excited about things. Got to be disciplined about this, and I should have been more disciplined about it. Yeah, I think that would be the clear, and the other part would be to partner with people that can help me in that. There's a big world of partnership out there, and I would be more fundamentally committed to partnerships.
Again, I think you nailed it, right? Because I think we risk, somebody listening in be like, oh my God, we just got to start with AI. Let's just create a bunch of new things
Yeah,
out there. Right. And you're right. I think one of the hardest things that I've learned as an entrepreneur is that discipline, right? To be successful in many cases, and I would maybe even all cases, that doing all things to all people is not the answer. You
yes,
gotta pick your niche. You gotta pick the value, and you got to hit it hard, even though it feels like, oh my God, I have all these other customers that I'm not going to be able to capture. So I think you nailed it exactly right. You have to apply discipline to the entrepreneurship to be successful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And let me tell you, shiny objects get your attention, and it's hard to say no to a big gift or a special initiative that really does look like an opportunity, but we haven't done it before. Uh, Discipline is important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So we're going to wrap this up here. So this next segment, I have two more kind of sections for you. So
Okay.
this is relatively new as part of our new transformed. It's called Rapid Fire. So the
Ah,
idea here is I ask you a couple questions, and it's really top of mind reaction. What do you think? So let's have some fun with this.
okay.
Um, One word that describes higher ed right now.
Fraught.
Mhm. Biggest misconception about entrepreneurship in higher education?
It can't be taught. You're born with it.
That's a, by the way, that paper was excellent on that.
Yeah.
It was really exciting to see that. Um, One capability every institution will need in the next 3 to 5 years.
Collaboration, partnerships, teaming,
Great. Hardest thing to change inside a university.
governance, shared governance, board governance, committee governance. Changing it is fraught. It could be dangerous if you do it poorly. You could lose trust if you don't do it well. But we've got to be faster. We've got to be more resilient. We've got to be more tolerant.
Great. One last question on the rapid fire. What gives you the most optimism right now?
The students are so good, so foresightful, so pure wonderfulness. I am blown away with the quality of the kids that are coming to Babson, that every day I go to bed and say, we're going to be okay.
That is great. That is great. All right, so let's close this out. We're also adding kind of a new section. It's kind of more personal, So, and this is someone I've been asking this, and as you just mentioned, fraught, right? Higher education. This is a tough moment for higher education, and the pressure's everywhere, you know. And when you think about what keeps you optimistic that institutions can navigate stronger, right? What are you going to be like when you think about the next year? Like, what are you going to be, what is Steve Spinelli focusing on for himself? And it could be professional, it could be personal, but what are you looking to kind of work on for you?
Yeah, my sort of focus over the next year is the raising the level of sort of, I'll get a little corny here, but raising the level of human compassion in the entrepreneurial process. If you look at the work at some of our academics at Babson, there's 8 or 9 papers on entrepreneurial leadership that were written. They're academic papers, but boy, when you get into the depth of them, there is a beauty to these things that talks about the process is about the human endeavor. Ultimately, we talk about money and capital and goods and business models, but it is about the human endeavor and making people happier, better, finding the joy in achievement. And I want to work over the next year in my own attitude about joy and about the human condition and making that a bigger part of the Babson experience.
Oh, wow. Steve, this has been fantastic. You are true inspiration, and you've given me multiple goosebumps throughout this. This has been fantastic. So, one of the things I'll take away from this is that, and it reaffirms kind of my view is that this isn't just about teaching entrepreneurship, right? It's about building institutions that can actually operate in a world of uncertainty. Because that's really what entrepreneurship is in many ways.
That's right.
Is
That's
starting
right.
something new. You don't know if it's going to work or not, and you're going to give it a shot, right? And ultimately to create that value continuously, and I think you and I agree, like that's where I believe higher education is heading, whether we realize it or not, or whether we're ready or not. And so, I think you're a shining example of that type of leadership that more institutions need to embody and resemble. And so, again, thank you for your time. And so with
Well,
that, go ahead.
well, Wayne, I am honored that you called me and we've had a great conversation. And I feel like when I hang up here, I got to go work harder. There's a lot to do. And I think what you're doing and sort of spreading the word of higher education in very positive ways is super important. I really am honored to be a part of this.
Awesome. Thank you. And, as I offered up before, if you ever want, a guinea pig as part of your entrepreneurship leader classes, you can always, I throw my hat in the ring. So,
Oh, I'm going to call on you.
well, thank you. Well,
God bless.
thank you again for being here, and for everyone listening and now watching. This is Transformed, where we focus on how higher ed institutions move forward when the pressure is real, the pace is accelerating, and standing still is no longer an option. Thank you for listening to Transformed. If this conversation made you rethink how work actually moves or gets stuck inside your institution, share it with somebody on your leadership team. Because this isn't about more ideas. It's about getting the right things done when everything's competing for your attention. For more, visit hire.digital/podcast or follow us on LinkedIn. I'm Wayne Bovier. Let's keep moving forward together.